Hello and welcome back to a playoff edition of Viper Bites primetime previews. And we have ourselves conference championships going down this weekend. And this time in the AFC, whatever's old is new again, so to speak, as we have the 12-4 Cincinnati Bengals heading into Arrowhead to take on the 14-3 Kansas City Chiefs. Now, how did we get here? Well, the Chiefs, hey, they snuck out a closer game than what they may have expected here last week, winning 27-20 against the number 4 seed Jacksonville Jaguars. Meanwhile, the Cincinnati Bengals, they took care of fellow AFC North division rival, the Baltimore Ravens, in that wild card round, 24-17, before taking it to the Bills here last week. I mean, you cannot go wrong. The way they dominated the Bills, we'll talk about that here in just a second. But this game was really never in doubt. Now, we talk about this game, the tail of the tape, so to speak. The Bengals and Burrow, they are 3-0 against Chiefs and Mahomes in last year's AFC Championship round there. Burrow was 23 of 38 for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns in that 27-24 overtime victory. In fact, in 3 games versus the Chiefs over the last 2 seasons, Burrow has a 72% completion rate, 9.1 yards per attempt, 982 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, and just a single interception. Now, Burrow and the Bengals, they are coming into this game hot, finishing the regular season with 8 straight wins. They also went on to get those 2 playoff wins, so that's a 10-game winning streak. I'm no genius when it comes to math, but that is pretty good. And again, that win against the Bills last week, that came in impressive fashion. The defense, it held the Bills to a season low 10 points, while their offense, they put up 27 points and 412 total yards against one of the top defenses in the National Football League. How do the Chiefs stop Joe Burrow, the king of the North, Snow Burrow, Joe Cool, whatever he is going by these days? Heck, you can't even stop him from getting nicknames, let alone stop his offensive play on the field. You can't even blitz him. Last season, Burrow improved on getting rid of the ball as the season progressed, averaging 2.69 seconds from snap to release in the regular season. Then once the playoffs hit, he was averaging 2.41 in that Super Bowl contest. This season, 2.55 seconds from snap to release, was second in the National Football League, only to Tom Brady. And in that wild card round against the Baltimore Ravens, from snap to release, 2.38 seconds. Now, the Bills, they ran a zone blitz early in the first quarter, resulting in Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase for an easy touchdown. Don't blitz Joe Burrow. It doesn't work out very well for you. Kansas City, they were second in the National Football League with 55 sacks. So you know they're able to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks. You got to do that to Joe Burrow without blitzing him. Now, Cincinnati, they allowed just 1 sack of Burrow here last week, and they've allowed just 1 of 32 rushes to have lost yardage. Now, all this, that's all coming without 3 offensive starters along that offensive line: Jonah Williams, Alex Kappa, and Lyle Collins. Now, even with the pressure that the Chiefs were able to get on opposing signal callers, they still allowed the 8th most fantasy points to receivers this season, allowing 20 touchdowns, 2,542 receiving yards to the position, and that worked out to about 34.95 fantasy points per contest. Now, Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars last week, they managed to convert on 7 of 13 third down attempts last week against this Chiefs defense. Well, Trevor Lawrence, he would end up going 24 of 39 passing for just 217 yards, with most of that production coming courtesy of Christian Kirk, who caught 7 of 14 targets for 52 yards. But you know what? He did drop that big catch there on that huge chunk play. Now, why am I mentioning all this? Why is it important? Well, Tyler Boyd, working out of the slot this week, he could be a sneaky play based on what we saw Christian Kirk doing, working those seams against this Chiefs defense just a week ago. Not to mention, in that first go-around with this Chiefs-Bengals matchup here in the regular season, it was Tyler Boyd who'd end up catching 4 balls for 60 yards in that regular season showdown. Kansas City, they will be focusing much of their attention, much of their game plan on Jamar Chase, who had 5 grabs for 61 yards and a touchdown a week ago. T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, you bet they're going to have Kansas City's attention. Now, Mixon, he finally had that RB1 type game that we've been waiting for all season, as he tore that Bills defense apart there for 105 yards on the ground on just 20 carries. In the regular season contest back in December, Chase would end up with 7 receptions for 97 yards. In fact, in 3 contests against this Chiefs team that Chase has faced them, he has 24 receptions for 417 yards. Now, playoff Chase, he has been Charlie Brown-esque. No, not that Charlie Brown. Now, after passing Randy Moss last week, Jamar Chase, he trails only Charlie Brown of Washington for the most playoff receiving yards in a player's first 2 seasons. Now, Charlie Brown, hey, 643 yards between 82 and 1983. That's the most in NFL history. Now, Chase, he currently sits at 463 yards entering this week's contest. Chase also joined Moss as the only players in NFL history to reach 3,000 yards receiving and 25 touchdowns in their first 2 seasons, and that's playoffs included. Joe Mixon, he missed that December 4th contest, but Samaje Perine averaged 5 yards per carry on his way to 106 yards on the ground, and he also hauled in an additional 6 passes for 49 yards. It's crazy to think that this Bengals team has won 3 road playoff contests within a calendar year after going 0-7 on the road in the playoffs in the previous 53 seasons. Obviously, Cincinnati, they are more than comfortable on the road here, but you have to feel that they felt disrespected by the National Football League, who had already gone out there and started selling playoff tickets for the Chiefs and the Bills in Atlanta. On the Chiefs' end of things, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, they are back where they are comfortable, and that is in the conference championship contest for the 5th consecutive season. Andy Reid, he's coached in 9 of these games. Mahomes and Reid, they tie Hall of Fame combinations such as Kenny Stabler and John Madden for the most consecutive conference championships, and they trail only Brady and Belichick, who had done it on 8 occasions between 2011 and 2018. For the Chiefs, they've heard it all week. We're 0-3 versus Burrow and the Bengals, and I'm sure last year's AFC Championship game will be brought up pretty much every day leading up into this contest, as we'll talk of Patrick Mahomes' high ankle sprain. Just when you think you've got this Chiefs backfield figured out, think again. In that divisional contest, the snap share, 65% to Jerick McKinnon to just 35% to Isaiah Pacheco. Now, the routes percentages, that made sense. 50% to Jerick McKinnon there, 28% to Isaiah Pacheco. Carries 12-11 in favor of McKinnon. Targets 1-0 in favor of Pacheco. But the total yardage, 101 Pacheco, 25 to McKinnon, and 95 of those 101 yards for Pacheco came on the ground. Now, the Bengals, they are allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs this season, averaging only 18.96 per contest, allowing just 9 rushing touchdowns and 1,311 yards on the ground, and that happens to be the 4th fewest yards on the ground this season. They've also allowed 493 yards and 3 scores to backs in the passing game. The run defense, it was much better, but far from great, as it yielded the 13th most fantasy points on a per-game basis, 22.4 to that running back position this season. You have to wonder how much of a factor that high ankle sprain is going to be in this contest. Mahomes, he is as tough as they come, but when we look at that average depth of target last week, it actually dipped considerably when he came back into the contest. It may not be necessarily the same thing, but recalling back to that Super Bowl loss to the Buccaneers just a few years back, Mahomes, he was dealing with that toe injury, if you do recall, which happened to hamper his ability to create on the run. If that's the case, things are going to be going from hard to real hard really quick. Now, it could mean we get even more Travis Kelce, who set an NFL tight end record once again last week against the Jaguars, hauling in 14 passes in a single playoff contest. Those 14 receptions, that led to 2 touchdowns and 98 yards. Then again, back in week number 13, the Bengals, they actually limited Kelce to just 4 catches and 56 yards. Looking at what Kelce has done in the playoffs, in his last 7 playoff contests, he has failed to score a touchdown only once while producing at least 95 yards receiving in each of those contests. Mahomes, he has a sight set on another Brady record there, as he and Kelce's 12 touchdowns, that sits only behind Gronkowski and Brady, who have a playoff record 15. In their previous meeting, both Jerick McKinnon and Isaiah Pacheco, they would find their way in the end zone. Pacheco doing it on the ground, accumulating 66 yards on 14 carries, while McKinnon, he would add the score on 1 of his 2 receptions. McKinnon, he would also go on to add 51 yards on the ground on just 8 carries. Now, looking back at that first meeting there, Mahomes, he was held to just 223 passing yards on 16 of 27, with a good portion of that coming to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who had 71 yards receiving on just 2 catches, and one of those catches happened to be for 42 yards. Now, one player that the Chiefs did not have that first go-around was Kadarius Toney, whose routes was considerably higher here last week as he ran 12 routes compared to his average of 8.25 in those games since he's returned from yet another hamstring injury. Now, of note, not a single receiver for the Bills had more than 40 yards receiving last week. Stephon Diggs, he accounted for 23.3% of the target share. This Bengals secondary, it played well, and the X factor in this contest, when it's all said and done, could be nickel blitz, which got to Josh Allen last week, and with a less than mobile quarterback there in Patrick Mahomes, could be a factor once again. With that all being said, hey, I don't know which way this game is going to go, but right now, Vegas, they have this game going from Kansas City just a couple hours ago. Now the Bengals are going to be favored. What do you think? Hit up in the comments below. Do you got the Bengals or do you got the Chiefs? Who's going to the Super Bowl? We'll see you on the next preview.